This is an interview with Mr. Louis LaCivita as part of the Italian-American World War II Veterans Oral History Project sponsored by the National Italian-American Foundation and the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania. It is March 29th, 2004, and we are in McKeesport, Pennsylvania.
This is Stowe Township.
Okay, Stowe Township. McKees Rocks or Stowe Township.
Yeah, we have a McKees Rocks post office, but this is Stowe.
Will you please tell me your full name and date of birth for the record?
My name is Louis A. LaCivita. LaCivita. But that's a capital C.
Capital C.
Yeah. In Italian, it's LaCivita.
Right.
That's the way you pronounce it.
Yeah.
But I was born on May 14th, 1925.
Right here in...
No, I was born in the big city of Wilmerding, PA.
You were born in Wilmerding, you know?
Yeah. I grew up there. I was in the... I left for the service. I went to Wilmerding High School. And I lived there, oh God, I guess until about... I was recalled to the service after World War II. I got recalled in 1953 for the Korean War. And I stayed in until 61.
Wow.
Okay. Then I met my wife. I was working as a detective in Kaufman's. I met her there. She was on the elevator. We got married and moved out here. She liked it here. This was it. Well, this is where she's from.
We'll back up a little bit, but you know where who came to the United States first, and your parents from Italy, or?
Yeah. The first one that came over here was my an uncle from Wilmerding. He during World War I. Okay. My father and three of his brothers were in the Italian Army. The younger one, he took off and came to the United States because he didn't want to go to the Army. So when he got here, they drafted him and they put him in the American Army.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, so he didn't get away with anything. But anyhow, he was in the American Army all the time. Then after World War II.
So your father was in the Italian Army, then?
Yeah.
And he was up in northern Italy.
After World War II, they came over here, my father and his other brothers. And they settled, let's see, Wilmerding, East McKeesport, and Trafford. That's where they lived in that area.
What part of Italy was your family from?
My father comes from Provincia di Campobasso. Okay, the town is Agnon.
Okay.
But they migrated from Agnon to a town near Foggia called Bovino. I don't know if you've ever been there.
No, I never have.
It's one of those things up on top of a mountain.
Yeah, little place on the top of a
mountain. Yeah. What they did in Italy, they would buy tracts of land, and they would clear them, and they made charcoal.
Okay.
And sold it. That was their family business. So that's how they ended up in the Foggia area. And during World War I, my grandfather, he passed away. So the business went with him because those guys were in the service. And that's why they came over here.
And what year would you...
I guess about 1920.
1920. Was he married? Was he married when he came over?
No, my mother's from Dunbar, PA.
Dunbar, PA.
Yeah, her people come from near Naples.
Naples, okay. And when your father got here, what did he do? And
he worked on a railroad.
work on a railroad too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was what they call car repairman. They made box cars in Pitcairn.
Oh, Pitcairn. Okay. And what's your earliest memories of your childhood in Wilmerding? And
I go back to the.
Growing up in.
I guess. I remember when my mother died. I was 8 years old. It was in 1932. I was not quite 8 years old when she died. And I remember the layout, the funeral, the snow, the whole works. You know. So that's my earliest childhood. And from then on, I have pretty vivid memory. I might be 79, but I still got it.
Yeah.
The computer still works.
When I guess like during the Depression, your mother passed. Well, how did you and your family get by? And you have siblings. And
my grandmother came over from Italy.
Mm-hmm.
She must have been about 80 at the time, you know. And she took care of us till she died. She died in 1940. I think she was 88 when she died. Yeah, about 88 years old. But she took care of it. By that time, I was 15, 16 years old. You know, we were pretty well up in there. Then I guess it was 1942, my father remarried after his mother died.
And what did you do during the Depression? You went to high school and
I grew up during the Depression.
Right.
Huh? Yeah. I was in a class of 43 at Wilmerding High School.
Class of 43.
And those days they called it Westinghouse Memorial.
Okay.
Could you hold this a minute?
Sure. Okay, I guess we were just talking about Wilmerding. What's some of the, real briefly, were there any traditions, Italian traditions you did with your grandmother did, your father, something they carried on over from Italy to here, Christmas or Easter?
Oh, yeah, naturally. We grew up as Italians. We didn't grow up as...
You speak Italian at home?
A little. Well, those days, yeah, I had to.
Right.
I could never... If we were at the table eating, I could never ask my brother to say, hey, pass the bread. I got smacked. Yeah, I had to tell him, hey, John, a bucket of pan, please. You know, half and a half, so my grandma would do I wasn't talking about her. Hey, well, you know, when they're 80 years old, get a little cranky. Not me, but them. So we talked Italian all the time in the house. When I went to school, I had to learn to speak English.
Was that tough for you? Was that tough at that time?
I don't think so.
Adapted, yeah.
You know, kids are resilient.
Yeah.
When I was in Italy and during, I was in Germany from 57 to 60. And I used to weekend in Italy because I was with the military police. And all the pilots, all my buddies, they all wanted to stay on the good side of the police sergeant, you know. And then they'd call me, hey Lou, we're going to Naples. You want to ride? Yeah, I'd fly down with them. We'd go down for the weekend, you know. And I found that in the schools down in the southern part of Italy, now where my mother came from, her They come from a place called Agropoli, which is about 25 miles south of Salerno.
Okay.
Right in there's the Gulf of what do they call it? Gulf of Salerno.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, they're right on the tip of that. On the southern tip is this city of Agropoli. And first, second graders in school, they were teaching them to speak German, French, and English, besides Italian. Now here, it's second grade, they're speaking 4 languages.
Wow. All right.
Over here, they send a kid to college and they can't teach them how to speak American.
Fortunately, yeah.
Hmm?
Fortunately, yeah. It's true. What did your family have any feelings toward Mussolini at all? Did your grandmother talk, or she know Mussolini when she came over? And
Well, Mussolini, they thought he was a great man, but that he goofed up when he tied up with that nut in Germany. That was his big mistake, cost him his life. He did a lot for Italy. He did a lot more than the king did. The king was a king, period. But Mussolini did a lot for the country. And if he hadn't, but there's a lot of politics involved over there that I don't care to get into now. I know why he went with Germany. I knew what backstabbers England and France were. They did the backstabbing in World War One, and that caused it.
yeah. What I guess you were in high school when the war broke out, right?
Yeah.
What was your reaction to it? I guess mostly
Well,
the Japanese
on December the 8th of 1941, I went down and enlisted in the Navy.
And how old were you then? you weren't even quite 18, huh?
Yeah.
That's right.
I enlisted in the Navy. The whole gang of us did.
Wow.
And I had to bring some papers home for my father to sign. And I didn't tell him what the papers were. I just told him he had to sign it for the school. Yeah.
Because I guess he didn't read English, right?
No. And my brother squealed on me.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
He was hot.
I took a hell of a beating, I'll tell you. He says, you got to go over there and get killed. I'll kill you here. So anyhow, as soon as I was 18, I went into the service.
So you joined, and no draft, you joined.
No, I was drafted, but I volunteered for the draft.
What did your dad think of the war? Was he... No.
Wasn't too crazy about it.
Americans against... Just Americans fighting in Europe or the Pacific, or he just was against it? The war.
Those guys, those old timers, they were pretty. They were staunch patriots, Americans, Yeah. But they didn't talk too much about the war in itself. I never heard my father complain or gripe about it. And yet, and I know that Roosevelt didn't treat the Italians very good in this country.
Yeah, I never knew. Well, can you explain it? Yeah.
You don't know about the La Storia Secreta?
Oh, Secreta, yeah. The lagers, these campi, the camps, right? No.
Yeah. They knew about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are internment camps that were for the Italians.
Yeah.
What do you know about it? I don't know really much about it, but
you don't.
I've heard of it, but I only heard of a couple.
What's the matter with Nick? He didn't fill you in yet?
No, we know, but I'm sure. What do you know? How many people were interned? And I only heard a couple of thousand. They said, "Oh, it's not comparable to."
125,000.
Wow, I did not know that. 125,000.
Yeah, I could give you the write-up on it.
125,000, and these are both American-born Italians.
Yeah, these guys, these people had they had their children were in the service, and they had them in those damn camps. Roosevelt wanted to get rid of all first, second, and third generation Italian and ship them back to Italy. Want to get rid of them. And somebody talked about it, and they claim that he was a saint. He was no saint.
Where were these camps at?
Oh, in North Dakota, Minnesota, up in there.
And so, what was the basis? How did they say, okay, same with the Japanese, that you're an Italian national, or were they members of the fascist party?
It was the same as the Japanese. They had the Japanese in those damn camps. Mm-hmm. Okay, because and I forget how many Japanese Americans were in the service.
Yeah.
Get a Congressional Medal of Honor, all kind of medals. It's still their parents were in these camps.
Yeah, most of them. Yeah.
The Italians, guys like Joe DiMaggio's father and mother were in a camp.
No, really? They were in camps?
Yeah. Yeah, I have some literature I'll give you. You can read.
And do you know anybody personally here in Pittsburgh? Or?
No.
No,
wasn't.
No. But during the war, you didn't know this, right? Until, I guess, after the fact.
Yeah.
So now,
well, during the war, I was a
gung-ho
jerk. Huh?
Did you felt American more than Italian, or I'm trying to understand, at that time, you didn't feel Italian. You were, to you, most of you and your friends, you were American.
I
right?
was an American, yeah.
Being Italian or having Italian never came into mind?
No.
No, you were American.
Yeah, I was.
How did your dad identify as being American, or did he?
My dad was an American citizen. He became a citizen when I was about 5 years old.
So, were you ever was your family ever treated, I guess, unfairly in Wilmerding at all, or that was mostly just everybody was immigrants, so nobody?
The only thing what we had in Wilmerding, the only resentment I had at that time was that I wasn't allowed to join the Boy Scouts.
Why was that?
Because the Boy Scouts in Wilmerding were sponsored by the American Legion, and they wouldn't allow us to join because our fathers were in the Italian army, not in the American army. He couldn't belong to the American Legion.
Even though they were allies.
So that was it. I'll never forget that. That has always been a point of contention to me with the American Legion.
Has the American Legion ever recognized this, what they did?
That was only in Wilmerding. I didn't know about any place else. Okay. That was it. The post in Wilmerding. I didn't know about any place else. I belong to the American Legion. I'm a member of the American Legion. I'm a member of the Disabled American Veterans. I'm a member of the Military Order of the Purple Heart. So, let's say it was those guys in Wilmerding that was their ruling. If you didn't belong to the American Legion, your kid wasn't allowed to belong to the Boy Scouts. So every time we ran into a Boy Scout, we beat the hell out of them.
Don't beat me up. I was a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's...
Yeah.
So you you were drafted in 1943.
Yeah.
You remember the date?
I left for the service August August. It was about 15th, I guess. August 15th of 43.
You went down to Pittsburgh and
Yeah.
did all your medical exams?
Yeah, I went to Oklahoma.
What base was this?
Camp Gruber
Camp Gruber.
was the 42nd Infantry Division that I went to. Then they shipped me to England in June of 44.
Oh wow! So this is probably right after D-Day, or you
Yeah.
were sent to?
Yeah, I went over to join my 9th Infantry Division in St. Louis. I got shot I was in Germany when I got shot. I spent a year in the hospital.
Talk about when you went to Oklahoma, and I guess you were all gung ho and
Oh yeah,
you were
hey,
in a fight.
I was a good-looking soldier. What can I tell you?
What did you at Camp Gruber? What was the training? You're an infantry.
Infantry, yeah, machine gunner.
Machine gunner. What kind of gun? What kind of gun? Machine gun.
It's a
AR or
it's water-cooled, heavy 30 caliber machine gun.
okay, you carried it.
Weighed 92 pounds.
92 pounds. Right?
Broken down.
Okay.
I was the first gunner. I carried a tripod that weighed 52 pounds.
Okay.
But my buddy carried the gun that weighed 40 pounds. Then there was another guy that carried the ammunition. They were big long belts of, I think, about, if I remember right, 250 rounds in each belt.
So you were part of a team, you know?
Yeah.
You just wasn't by yourself. So that where you did basic in Camp Gruber?
From there until the day I got shot, that's what I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the what you did at Camp Gruber. What was a typical day? You trained.
We learned to shoot the gun. We marched.
Yeah.
We went on 25-mile hikes.
It was all desert.
No, mountains. That's the hills, Oklahoma. We were in what they call the Cookson Hills.
Okay, that would probably be near Arkansas side of it.
Yeah, near the city, the nearest city or town to us was a place called Muskogee.
Okay.
Muskogee, Oklahoma. And the Cookson Hills is where we trained, running around sleeping in the woods over there and having a lot of fun.
You like it, yeah?
Huh?
You liked it?
Hey, I was having fun.
Heck yeah. Was there any, I guess in your initiation getting trained, was there any kind of propaganda that they talk about, like fascist Italy? And do you ever have any problems being Italian? No? Never surfaced? No.
Not in the Army. We were everything there. My commander was a Polak. My second gunner was a Jew. We were everything, There was no distinction over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, my second gunner was a guy by the name of Jules Koenig. He's from Gloversville, New York. He's just as Jewish as I was Italian. So I remember when we met. I says, Koenig. I says, what is that? What are you? He says, I'm a Jew. I said, I didn't ask you your religion. I want to know what nationality you are. Oh, German. Okay. Now we know. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Koenig, you know what that means?
King.
King. That was his name.
Yeah, King.
Yeah, we're still in touch to this day.
Yeah?
Matter of fact,
Oops.
got his picture here. Yeah, get that $2 bill out of there. Yeah, I got his picture in here someplace.
So, so you were trained. You were part of a. Now, how many men were in this machine gun crew? You were 3.
No, there was 8 men.
8 men.
Yeah, because we had 5 ammo carriers.
5 ammo carriers. Now, of course, each gentleman, each soldier, they carried their own rifle, right?
Oh yeah,
They carried what, M1.
Yeah, they were all armed.
And you carried the tripod.
Yeah.
And you yourself had an M1 and.
No, I had a 45.
You know, okay, you just had a 45.
Yeah.
Wow.
I did enough damage with the gun. I did.
I did a couple grenades.
Yeah.
So that would mostly you trained with the machine gun. When did you learn that you were going overseas? And you were still at Camp Gruber. That's what it's called.
Oh. God, it had to be a couple months before D-Day.
Yeah.
Because by the time we went from there, we went to New York, we went to England. You know, there was a lot of time involved there. But
so you guys, you took a train, I guess, from Oklahoma, and
yeah, took a train.
They told you right up, you're going overseas now, or they just said, "Well, get on a train."
Yeah,
we're going
no, you're going overseas.
You're going overseas.
Yeah.
What was your feelings? You were
Hooray! Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. That's what we trained for.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you get to New York,
I wouldn't do that now, but there'd be 4 guys going, me and the 3 guys dragging me.
Yeah. So you got on a boat in New York, and away you went.
3 weeks in the damn water.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow, that seems like a long time. I guess.
3 weeks from New York to London.
What'd you get? You were seasick a lot.
No, I was surprised. It didn't bother me.
Now, were you on like a cruise ship, or it was an old Navy ship, or I heard stories of what was? Remember?
I'm trying to think of the name of that thing we were on. It was one of those, what the hell did they call them in those days? Liberty ships.
Yeah, Liberty ships. Okay.
Yeah.
And in this time, what were you a part of the 9th Division at this time, or you were still?
No, I was still part of the 42nd.
42nd.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a replacement, is what they're called. I was going over.
Okay, you were a replacement.
As a replacement.
For someone who was you were just replacement.
Somebody who didn't make it across the water.
Unfortunately. What would you have would you have preferred to be sent maybe to the Pacific, or it didn't matter, heck?
No.
The suicide Japanese.
No, there was not. That's one thing I said. I thank God I got sent to Europe instead of the Pacific.
Because of
all that island fighting, that was tough. My buddies that were in those islands, even like Dominic Sersosimo and those guys, they had a lot rougher than we did. And at least the people that we dealt with, when you weren't fighting, you were dealing with the locals. They were white.
Yeah.
They didn't have cannibals like they did down in Borneo and the rest of those islands.
I can imagine. So when you left New York, you went to England, right?
Yeah.
And where'd you land in England, and how did that all unfold?
We landed somewhere north of England, in the northern part of England.
Okay.
And then we took a train from there down to London. In the London area, that's where we were at. And I'm trying to think of the name of that town we were at. Man, you're making me dig pretty deep.
Ask tough questions.
I was in a place called Bath.
Okay, Bath, England. Okay.
Yeah. I remember that with that weird name, Bath. And in the town they had a statue of the Lord Nelson. That's the guy that had one arm and one leg, one eye.
Okay. Is that Admiral Nelson?
Yeah.
Isn't it from Trafalgar, I think? Is that it?
Trafalgar Square.
There was a battle or something?
Yeah. But no, well, this is where he was from, up in there. And they had this statue of him with that one arm, one leg, and one eye. Yeah, the half man.
Half man. I guess I'm gonna backtrack a real quick question, but when it took you 3 weeks to cross the Atlantic, did you ever come under attack by U-boats, or put on like warning, or did you guys have to get your life vest on? Any problems with the
Can't remember any.
No, nothing. So what was the equipment? Your typical, I guess by that time when you got to England, or maybe even in the States, what kind of equipment did you have besides your 45 and you carried the tripod? What were some of the other items that you had?
In my pack, I had a blanket. I had a blanket, a raincoat, a knife, a bayonet. Of course, half a dozen hand grenades, and half of a tent, half of a pup tent.
Pop tent.
Yeah.
Little thing, huh? Real little, huh?
Well, no, it was big enough. Two of them together, two guys could sleep in them. See. So you always had to find a guy with another half so you could put the tent together. But most of the time, all we did was wrapped up in it.
Just wrapped. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, we would more or less lay it on the ground, and then get in it with a blanket and wrap everything up like a cocoon. It was too much bother to be putting up a damn tent every night.
Imagine most all of you guys, you didn't, when you went into combat in Europe, you pitched all that stuff, huh?
No.
No? Tell all you guys kept it, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, you had to sleep. You had to have it.
I should have asked you this earlier, but in Oklahoma, what would you do for fun? Like on weekends or off, like recreation? Some things you don't want to... Something. Of course, you had the movies, they have...
Yeah, it was the usual thing. They had the USO shows there. We had social, what the heck did they call the clubs for the... they were like service clubs, that's it. They had service clubs for the... where we had pool tables and ping pong tables and this kind of stuff. And half the time you were too tired to go to those places. You come back from a 25-mile hike, you wouldn't even feel like you wanted to play pool. All you want to do is take a shower and get some sleep. They'd wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
So, what, you got into, I guess, going back over to England, you were in Bath, and how long were you in Bath? And
I was only there a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And we headed over for the coast of France.
When did you hear about D-Day? Were you still on the ship? Did the military notify you guys that, okay, we landed on June 6th, and how did you first find out about it?
I guess I was in Bath when I heard about it. Yeah, I was in Bath when I heard about it. Yeah. Of course, we were all cheering and yay, hooray, you know. But we didn't realize how many casualties were involved. You don't think about that. Because ain't nothing going to happen to you. It's not going to happen to the other guy.
So I guess you got to think like that, maybe, no? You have to think like that.
That's the way they teach you to think.
Yeah.
See, that was the difference between the American Army and the German Army.
Oh,
yeah. Every guy in the American Army figured that there ain't nothing going to happen to him. It's going to happen to the other guy. And if the sergeant got killed, it didn't matter. Somebody else would take over. But the Germans, they weren't taught that. When the sergeant got killed, they were lost. They didn't know what the hell to do anymore. They threw up their hands. That was the thing that we always tried to do, get the guy that had the stripes, knock him off.
Oh, yeah.
The other guys were lost. They couldn't think for themselves. They were machines. But every man in my squad could do my job.
Oh, wow.
And I could do
and you were trained
their
like
jobs.
That.
That's right.
Multi-tasking.
Same way with the sergeant that ran our squad. Half the time we told him to go to hell. I was the boss. I was the gunner.
What was your rank? PFC?
PFC, yeah.
But,
praying for civilian.
I never heard that. Wow, praying for civilian. That's funny. What do you think of? You have any interactions with the Brits when you're in Bath? Any interactions with this? No.
Yeah.
So tell me about after Bath. You got on another ship, right?
Yeah, we got on one of those things. We crossed the British English Channel, and we went over to. I joined the 9th Division at St. Louis.
So when you
that was the day that we were bombed by 4,000 of our own planes.
You were bombed by 4,000 planes.
Yeah, man, the sky was black with planes.
How do you? I don't quite. You accidentally bombed by American.
Yeah, they had the way I understand that there was some kind of banners or flags or some kind of markers that they were supposed to bomb, like south of these markers. But we advanced past the markers. We were into the area that was supposed to get bombed. We went too fast.
Okay. And so this was at St. Lo.
Yeah.
They bombed you.
That's a day I told those guys. I said, if I survive this, buddy, I have to come back to the service. I'm going to join you.
How many thousands of bombs? Or
that was like 4,000 planes, from what I understood.
4,000 planes?
Yeah. There was a lot of planes up there that day.
The sky was completely black.
Yeah.
Nothing was the bomb.
It looked like a black cloud going down there. They were all planes.
So you had explosions going all around you.
That's right.
That must have been hell on earth.
It was. It was the worst thing I ever lived through.
Was the Germans firing at you, or you were just experiencing just?
That's the only thing that was bothering us was those guys up there. Hadn't seen a German yet.
Wow. So this is the day you landed, or for one of the first days you were
It was
there?
the first day of combat. that was my baptism.
Ah, what a baptism. Baptism of fire.
Yeah.
What beach did you land? Did you land at one of the D-Day beaches when you crossed the channel? And
What the hell was it? See, all the fighting was over on the beaches.
Okay.
If I remember right, it was Omaha Beach, but don't hold me to it. Yeah, it must have been Omaha Beach.
So when you got offshore and then you started going inland and
yeah,
how did you?
Went by jeep. We went by to where the 9th was at St. Louis.
How long that took you from when you landed in St.
Just
Louis?
not long.
Not long at all.
It was only a matter of maybe 20 miles or so.
So you were in your jeep and now here comes the.
No, I was already up there.
You were up there. Here comes
I already had my hole dug.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, man, I never come out of that hole.
So you were in a foxhole the whole time they were.
Yeah.
Boom, boom. How close do you think the bombs were coming toward you guys? How close?
I saw our people get killed. I saw guys blown out of their holes. Just hit that bomb hit over there, and you could see the body flying in the air. That's enough to scare the hell out of you. You know the guy that's trying to get rid of the under guard in our Pledge of Allegiance? He wasn't there because there were no atheists in the foxholes that day, buddy. Everybody was praying to God.
And then you became a believer.
If you wasn't one before that, you became one there. We always said there was no atheists in the foxholes.
I think I've heard of it. So how long did that only lasted a couple hours?
Oh yeah, it was about a couple hours. But,
so just because you advanced beyond a certain marker,
yeah,
that was already on the ground, or
yeah, they had these things. They were like banners or something that they would lay down and do it. That's where we're supposed to be on each side of the banners and the cross on the other side. But we had overran them.
Wow. So what did that do to all your guys? And you suffered a lot of casualties, of course.
We got religion.
You got religion. Did you ever get? Were you able to like call in, or what would your officer do? You couldn't do nothing.
Nothing.
Just had to deal with it.
Nothing. There was nothing. They didn't have the sophisticated communications that they have nowadays.
Wasn't there an operator or a guy with a radio?
Yeah, they had a radio that weighed about 100 pounds that the guy had to carry around on his back.
Yeah, I guess he was always the first target.
Today they got him in their back pocket.
Yeah. Yeah, your little thing.
Yeah.
Wow. So after your day of your baptism of fire, said, where did you go after that?
Well, we fought through Normandy. We went into Belgium and into Germany. I was in a place called, the name about that long. One night, I heard some activity going on in front of me, and I called in headquarters to find out if there was anything going on out there. If we had any patrols, anything out there. He says, "Nope, nothing." So I picked up a rifle. I didn't want to fire my machine gun. Mm-hmm. At night, It's like daylight when you shoot off 250 rounds. It's like daylight around you. You know.
Yeah, they would see your position. Right?
Yeah. So I picked up a rifle, and I shot at the wherever I felt the noise was coming from, and I get out of the hole to see what I hit. Somebody shot me. I got hit. I was lucky.
Who? American friendly fire?
No,
you don't know.
No. Whoever it is, he that's when they got daylight around me. Because after he shot me, I turned a machine gun on him. Back a shot under my left knee. Yeah, I'll show you. See that?
Yeah.
The bullet went in there, came out here. You could put a pencil through it. And all this was all shattered.
Wow. From the bone, everything was all...
Yeah. I spent 6 months in a cast from my toe all the way up to here.
6 months. Wow.
Yeah, I was in... I got hit November the 15th. There's my citation up there. Next to George. See it on top?
So this was in November of 44?
Yeah.
So you were in Germany by that time?
Yeah, I was way in Germany. And I was in a hospital. I got discharged. I got sent home in the last part of September of 45. I was in the hospitals all that time.
Were you involved in the Battle of St. Lo?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, I've heard of that. St. Lo was a city, and you had to you were getting the Germans out of that city.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, that's why they were bombing us over there.
Right.
Over there, see, they were bombing that.
Mm-hmm.
The hedgerows was a rough place to. We had to fight from one hedgerow to the next.
So, this is the countryside and
Yeah.
there's hedges. And
Yeah, like I have hedges all around my house. Well, that's why they got them all around their acreage.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess that was to keep the cows in or whatever the hell, whatever reason they had. But they didn't have fences. They had these hedges all over the place. You had to go from one to another. Was like each one. It might be 100 feet between mine and the next guy, and we had to clear that out. The Germans were on one side, we were on another. And like idiots, we were shooting at each other, you know.
That's all you had to do. You get one hedge to another.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we were idiots. Now we're buddies. We're friends.
So after that, then you went into St. Lo, and
we went straight through it. Right?
How long would when you engaged the Germans, and what would you do? You would set up the tripod and or help fire the machine gun, or were you fired right? And
yeah, well, I'd throw my tripod down, and Julie would come down and stick the gun in it. Another guy would hand me a box of ammunition, and I'd load it, and hey, we fired it. Fired at the general direction of where the Krauts were. I was firing, one time I was firing at targets that were 5 miles from where I was at. I didn't even see what I was firing at.
You traveled that far.
Over the air and down, yeah. I have my World War II notebook in that drawer over there with the targets that I was firing at. Yeah, I'll show it to you.
Like I said, so it's 600 rounds a minute. you had.
That's a lot of bullets.
Hell yeah. So it was 30 caliber BAR and
No, 30 caliber Browning.
Browning.
No BAR.
I think you're Browning.
Well, BAR is a Browning automatic rifle.
Yes, that's where I get this at.
See?
Okay, it's just
This was a Browning machine gun.
Browning machine gun, okay. And so in that tube was water.
Yeah.
And you had to put water in there?
Oh yeah, all the time you had to put water in.
So after
otherwise you run 600 bullets through there in a minute, that thing would be red hot. The water would be boiling. You could make coffee with it.
So
it held about 2 gallons of water.
Held 2 gallons of water, and there would be some guy that had to pour water in. That was his job.
Yeah.
Pour water.
He kept a can full of water.
And he would have to carry it.
He carried it. Yeah.
Would you guys find water when it I guess it was tough. No, okay. Sometimes you couldn't find water. No.
Well, there was always water behind us in the kitchens. The kitchens came behind us.
Oh yeah.
They weren't too far away from us.
Well, if you guys didn't eat, was it K rations or C rations?
C rations, K rations.
And you guys were at they would have kitchens.
I still, to this day, I cannot eat baked beans unless they're cold.
Get out.
I don't like them. They got to be cold.
That'd be cool.
I open up a can of Heinz's baked beans. Eat them cold. That's the way I like them.
That's why
Huh?
you eat them.
I got used to them that way.
What how would you say with in combat? Was it you didn't have time to think, right? You reacted.
That's it.
That's
you did it instinctively, whatever you were taught.
I guess the first couple of times you kind of got to your nerves, right? You were nervous. And,
Yeah, I guess.
I assume. Okay, here's the hedgerows. How would you say the Germans as soldiers? I know you mentioned that they were lost without their
Oh yeah, they were.
Were they tough?
Sure, they were tough, but they were robots.
Yeah.
They were not taught to think for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They were taught to carry out orders. If the sergeant told them shoot 10 times, that's what he would shoot. If there was 50 guys coming toward him, he would only shoot 10 times.
When you were in St. Lo, were they dug in pretty?
Oh yeah, everybody was dug in. That's one thing. Sometimes we used each other's holes.
It was. How would you say when you were in St. Lo? You were constant fighting and just you were firing machine gun all the time.
No, not really.
No.
Nah.
How many days? How long was St. Lo?
That was only a couple of days. It wasn't bad.
So after you.
There was worse fights than St. Lo that I was in.
Did you capture any German prisoners?
Me? No.
No.
Never had any. Never had captured any. We didn't take prisoners.
No.
What's that going to do with machine guns?
So you were still part of the 9th Infantry Division?
Yep. Up until the day I got shot.
So after St. Lo, you went to Paris and up that way. And was Pat in charge of the 9th? Or?
No, Omar Bradley.
Okay, Bradley. Okay.
Best damn general they had in the United States Army.
Yeah? Better than Patton?
Better than any of them.
How about Eisenhower?
Better than Eisenhower. Eisenhower was compared to Omar.
What made Bradley better then? What made him better in your opinion?
He was a human.
Oh yeah.
Before, if we had to take a hill, for instance, and he figured out that we could take that hill without anybody getting hurt. Okay. He worked his way around it to get to it. Where guys like Patton, it was your blood and their guts. They didn't care about you.
What about Eisenhower? I guess did he?
He was a phony as a general, and he was a phony as a president. I'm a Democrat, in case you haven't figured that out.
What?
I thought I had a picture in here of the machine gun.
So I guess fighting the Germans got a little, why maybe it's wrong to say easier, but after D-Day, after liberating Paris, did you get a little faster, or
yeah? Well,
what
they saw that there was the end was coming. You know, their big hurrah, their last hurrah was the Battle of the Bulge. After that, it was.
Were you ever bombed by the Germans? The German aircraft?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah, you know, foxhole don't bother you.
Yeah.
You know. I think while I was in Germany, it's a funny story in a way. I dug a hole for my what we call for my machine gun placement. Right? Of course, I slept in there. So we were outside of this town that we were in, this Schevenhut. It had one of those baby farms that the Nazis had all over Germany. They had these young girls, and they'd bring their heroes in. The girls would service them. They would have babies for Hitler's youth. Okay, so this was one of those towns.
Well, this is in Germany.
And I went into the house, and I took a mattress out of the bedroom, brought it down into my hole, so I could sleep on the mattress instead of the ground. Yeah. Right? Now the next morning, I don't know what made me do it. I rolled the mattress up, tied it with a rope. I was bringing it back into the house again. And as I came out of that hole with this thing in front of me, a bomb went off. It blew me back into the hole again. Not a scratch on me, but that mattress was all torn to shreds. If I hadn't had that mattress in front of me, I'd have been blown to hell. I'd have been gone. But that mattress saved my life. And I always said, God takes care of drunks and fools. And he told me that morning, bring the mattress back. That's what I was doing. I don't know whether it's tragic or funny or what it is, but buddy, I'll never forget. That's one thing I'll never forget. I can still see that mattress all shredded up, all kind of shrapnel and crap in it.
How far you were blown back?
It blew me right back.
Quite this?
Blew me right out and blew me back into the hole again. See, I was just getting out of the hole.
So some German artillery.
I got religion that day.
Yeah.
Believe me. Even my Jew friend he got religion that day when he saw me float into that hole.
So where you at in your foxhole? A lot of guys were near you. And,
Yeah.
so were you at the front lines? Was this the front
Yeah,
line?
this was the point.
That was the point. So where this building was
It was behind me.
Well, it was behind you. Okay,
Yeah.
so it was not behind enemy lines. It was in your lines.
Yeah.
Wow. Speaking of religion, was there like a chaplain? Was there ever a chaplain in your? Did the chaplain ever come by?
Oh yeah, we would have the priest that was with our outfit. We'd have mass out in the field, you know, and he would set his crucifix on the hood of the Jeep. That was the altar. And we'd be standing around watching them going to mass. I went to mass in German churches. I went to mass in French churches as we'd be going through.
So you got into. You didn't fight in the Bulge, though.
I was already shot. I was already in a hospital.
So you were up in. Were you in Germany at this time then, or this was near?
I was in that baby factory.
In that baby factory. And what was the name of this place?
Schevenhut.
Schevenhut.
Yeah. Schevenhutte. I believe that's the way it was spelled.
Schevenhut. Schevenutte. Schevenhut.
Hutte.
And so this is right before you got
Right before the Bulge.
Right before the Bulge.
Yeah.
Right before you got shot. No.
Well, the Bulge was in right after I got shot.
Right.
All right. As a matter of fact, if I remember right, I was in a hospital in a cave where they had brought me when the Bulge started. And they brought me from there. They took me to Paris to a hospital. I saw Paris through the back window of an ambulance. Then from Paris, I went to England. They operated on me in Paris.
They operated on you. Got the bullet out.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't have to get the bullet out. It was gone.
That's right. It went through.
It didn't slow down.
It didn't slow down. No.
Phew. Felt like somebody hit me with a baseball bat, knocked me flat on my face. Because I was standing when he hit me.
It's probably, I understand, but it hurt pretty bad, huh? It's not a baseball bat, but it was.
It hurt.
It's just.
It smarts.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it, but. So you were treated by you got the medics there, and was there a medic that treated you?
The medic, let me tell you about this guy. He lives in Masontown, PA. I gave you his name. His name was Walter Vincenelli.
Okay.
Walter was a medic. And he came up there and picked me up. Threw me over his shoulders. And he ran about 3 miles with me hanging up there to get me to a battalion aid station to where they could work on my leg. That was 1944. This is 60 years later. He and I are still the best of friends. Yeah, he lives in Masontown. Hell of a man. Here's the guy. You got to interview him. His civilian life is a story and a half. He was one of those guys that rescued miners that were trapped underground. That's what he did all his life.
Always in service of others.
Yep.
And he took you ran 3 miles with you on his back.
Yeah, and I weighed 200 pounds. I still weigh. Now I weigh about 230.
So he got you back, and then you went to Paris. And did they operate you on you there?
No, they just wrapped me
They
up.
just wrapped you up, took you to Paris.
Kept me stopped bleeding and that, but they didn't have the facilities to operate, so they shipped me back to Paris.
What did they do? They had us exactly this. You said it shattered your leg.
My whole leg was shattered. The tibia. This I think they call it tibia. The tibia was all shattered, and above the knee was shattered where this bullet hit it.
Even above the knee, even if it was.
Yeah. Well, I was cast from up here all the way down to my toes, and it took me a year to heal. So he did a hell of a job on me.
Yeah. In fact, I could see the indent, but it's hard to even notice anything happened. So kind of.
You could tell I got an artificial valve in my heart. I got a steel valve in my heart. Can't tell.
No.
I got 1.5 foot of my colon missing. Can't tell. God takes care of me.
Yeah, so where did you recover? In England for a year?
Yeah.
You were sent back to the States?
I was in England in a place called Leeds.
Okay, Leeds. Okay.
Yeah.
You were there.
I was in a hospital there. I was there from November. Let's see, November, December, January, February, March. Yeah, March, April. I was there 6 months. Then they shipped me to the States, and I went to Richmond, Virginia for about a month. 2 months. I was in not Richmond, I was in Staunton, Virginia. Staunton, Virginia for about 2 months. Then I went up to Long Island. I was up in Long Island until I got discharged the last part of September.
Of 45.
Yeah.
So, and the whole time were you being rehabilitated too?
Yeah.
So they took the cast off and...
Yeah, they put me to work driving an ambulance.
Oh, really? Here?
Hey, you can't loaf. You gotta do something.
You're here in the States, you gotta drive an ambulance.
I drove ambulance in Long Island after they took the cast off.
Okay.
I had to have something to do. I just couldn't lay around.
Okay. Were you? Were they talking about sending you back to Europe, or?
Yeah.
Or this was after VE Day.
Yeah. By the time they took that cast off, I threw away my crutches and whatever. The war was over in Japan and Europe.
So how did you? I guess you were relieved, that.
Oh yeah, I was sweating out going to Japan.
Oh, okay, yeah, Japan too, yeah.
Yeah, but luckily the war ended over there, and they sent me home.
When you hear they dropped the atomic bomb, what did you think of the power of this new weapon?
I said, great. They should have done it before.
On the Japanese.
Yeah, it's pretty hard when you are. Well, for want, I don't want to use the word brainwashed, but you're psyched out against the enemy.
Yeah.
They're the enemy. Pretty hard to sympathize with them when they throw a bomb and they kill 500,000 of them. All you gotta say is, man, thank God they didn't bring it over here. And by doing that, how many lives, American lives, did they save? Because to invade Japan, if we would have had to hit the shores over there and go to fight in Japan, there would have been a lot of casualties. A lot of Americans would have died.
Man, that's what they say.
And probably a lot more Japs or Japanese than did die. There would have been a lot more die if.
Yeah. War would last a lot longer.
Yeah.
So, when you were discharged, VJ Day 2 was done.
Yeah, I got home. It was just about the last day or the first day of October. I got home.
Describe coming home. You were in Long Island when you came coming home, and you took a train here to Pittsburgh, and
yeah,
no parades, no anything. You just went
parade.
Return. And that's what I hear. I hear that I don't know.
We didn't have any parades. We didn't have anything. Come home.
They always show pictures of VE Day or VJ Day or in Times Square and the confetti's falling, and I guess people my age or maybe my father's age who were just born at that time. We think we hear about the Vietnam veterans.
That was that day.
That day.
But when we got home, there was nothing there. There was no welcoming party there, or you just went home. Yeah. I got home on a Friday. Monday I went to work in the Westinghouse.
Yeah.
Had to go to work.
When you were wounded, were you in contact with your dad and your family? And
yeah.
Did they ever come visit you?
I wrote them before the army. They knew about me getting.
Get out.
I wrote home and told them that you're going to be getting a telegram from the army telling you I was wounded. Don't worry about it. I'm okay. Don't get excited.
Wasn't the army supposed to be the first ones? They're always the one going to the door.
Yeah, but when there's 10,000 of the people, it takes a little while to get to everybody.
So. You received the Purple Heart, and did you get the Purple Heart when you were in the hospital, or when were you awarded that?
They did.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I got the Purple Heart while I was in the hospital. The colonel came around and pinned it on me and gave me a kiss, and as far as I was concerned, the Purple Heart was worth 5 points towards getting a discharge. You had to have so many points to be getting out of the service.
Yeah, explain that, the point system. I've heard that. I don't quite. How did that? So the more points you had, the faster you get out of the military.
Yeah, like you had. If I remember right, you got 1 point for every month you were in the service. Mm-hmm. And for every month you were overseas, you got extra points. Mm-hmm. And for every citation or medal you got, there was extra points. Now the Purple Heart was worth 5 points. Some of them were worth 2, some were worth 10. But the Purple Heart was worth 5 points, and I had another one, Combat Infantryman's Badge. It was worth 5 points. And $10 a month of my pay.
For having a Purple Heart?
No, the Combat Infantryman's Badge. Yeah, I got that while we were fighting. I got that over there. But the Purple Heart I got after I was wounded. I was out of it altogether then. But
do you think the system was fair? Was this system, you think, fair?
I imagine. I never questioned it. We never questioned it. We figured, the guys that had all these points, there were some guys that had been overseas for 3 years and never been home. Yeah. They should have been the first ones to go home. I forget how many points you needed to go home.
So, when you got home, you went right back into Westinghouse.
Yeah, I had to go to work.
What was it like returning to being a civilian? You know, was it the transition?
I always was very resilient. Yeah.
You know, resilient.
Didn't bother me one way or another.
You adapted. You just
Yeah,
rode with
real
it.
fast. Yeah, I had to. I was, the old saying, if you're dealt a lemon, make lemonade.
Yeah.
That was me. Whatever was happening, I accepted it and went on with it. Never any regrets of what I could have done or what I should have done.
Mm-hmm.
I did it. I made a decision. That was it. And I never worried about whether I made the right decision or not. I made it. You live with it. Yeah. I got out. I had to go work in the Westinghouse. I didn't like it. I hated the Westinghouse.
Right.
But until something better came along, I became a policeman. I spent 40 years as a law enforcement, one way or another. When I worked for the railroad, I investigated fraud and embezzlement. I was a special investigator for the railroad. I worked out of the auditing department, and we investigated. We audited the contractors and the vendors, the people that the railroad did business with, to make sure that they weren't, hosing us.
Did you go to school for this, or
Oh yeah,
was this after the war, or through like GI Bill, or it just was?
top right.
Mm-hmm.
See what it says there?
Department of the Air Force.
Special Investigators Course.
So,
And I'm an accountant. I studied accounting at Duff's Business College.
okay. When you became a police officer, and for what department? In Wilmerding?
Wilmerding, yeah. I was there 7 years.
This is right after the war. You became a
Yeah.
police officer.
Yeah. But I got called back to the.
You were called back.
All the cops, all my buddies, we all belonged to the Air Force Reserves.
So how'd you get in Air Force Reserves if you were in the Army?
Well,
How'd you get in the Air Force Reserves?
all the cops belonged to the Air Force Reserve
Yeah,
Air Police Battalion at the air base up here.
Oh, okay.
So a couple of my buddies talked me into going. We used to go once a month for a weekend. Had a nice weekend together. We'd go away once a year for 2 weeks of vacation. So I went with them. It was fun.
You were called up.
And then during the Korean War in '53, I got a letter asking me to come back on active duty. I didn't have to.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I could have told them, no, I don't want to go, because I had the Purple Heart and I had 3 kids. But the politicians were starting to get on my nerves on the police department. It wasn't fun anymore to be a cop. It was always if I arrested somebody, I'd have 50 politicians on my back, And when I got a chance to go to the Air Force as a air policeman, I took it. I said, "Yeah, I'll go, no problem."
Did you go to Korea?
No, that's what made me laugh. They shipped me to Africa.
Africa?
Yeah.
We're at Africa.
I was in Morocco.
Morocco?
Yeah, I was there for about a year. Then I came home, and I went to school. I studied special investigations. I was with the OSI for a while. And I got a chance to go to Germany for 3 years, so I volunteered. I went back to Germany. That was 3 years I had my family with me. It was nice.
Oh, your family went to Germany too. That's great.
Yeah.
So then you were an active member of the U.S. Air Force.
Well, yeah, I was a staff sergeant in military police.
Yeah.
I was like being a chief of police in Pittsburgh.
Where were you based in Germany?
12th Air Force headquarters, Ramstein.
Ramstein, okay.
And part-time I ran the youth center for them.
For the American kids? Or
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
How did it feel to be back in Germany? How did it feel to be back after, 10 years after the war? And,
The people were great.
yeah, a lot of changes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wasn't in the part of Germany I fought in,
Right,
see.
okay.
That was,
West, I guess.
I was east of where I fought.
Okay.
So I didn't see any of those people. But the ones that we dealt with over there. I remember I had one guy that used to take care of the equipment in the boys' club that I was running, the youth center. He would take care of the pool tables and the ping pongs and all that. I used to buy my supplies off of him. He was an old Nazi colonel. We turned out to be friends. Yeah, no hard feelings. I in the Air Force at that time. I don't know what it's like now, but we were allowed to wear our combat unit patch on your shoulder. So even though I was in the Air Force, I was allowed to wear the Army combat badge that I wore, and I wore all my medals. And he knew I had that I fought in Germany. No problem.
No problems at all. He's fine with it.
No, yeah, we got along good.
So after 3 years and
Most of the German people knew that Hitler was a nut. This colonel, was the only guy I met that admitted he had been a Nazi.
Oh, really? He was the only one.
Everybody else, no. They asked me, where were you? Where'd you fight during the war? I says, right here in Germany. I said, where'd you fight? Oh, I was over in Russia. Nobody fought in Germany. None of those people. They all fought in Russia. I says, well, I was here.
So you came back after about 3 years in Germany? And
Yeah.
You returned to the police force? And
No, I went back to I went to Texas for a year.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the Mexican border there for a year or so before I got out. Then I came home, and I didn't want to go back on a police department. So I went to, I became a private detective. And I worked for a bunch of law firms doing all kind of casualty investigations. Everything but divorces, I went handling them.
Tell me about your involvement with the Italian American veterans, war veterans, and how that organization got started.
Well, let me see. The Italian American war veterans were started in 1932 in Connecticut.
Okay.
They spread out from there. Well, there was the post in Pittsburgh was Allegheny County Post Number 1. And its members included people like Musmano, Judge Musmano,
Okay.
and a few others, Well, after Musmano died, the post kind of disintegrated.
This is after the Second World War.
No, this was. I'm going. Masmano died in the '60s, if I remember right. '60s is no, it was later than that. But after he died, it fell apart. See. So early in 1980, 82, 83, something like that, I was the National Vice Commander of the Military Order of the Purple Heart. And I was in Florida in a convention. Some guy from New Jersey came up and he asked me, he wanted me to support him for one of the offices, you know. And I says, well, tell me about yourself, you know. What am I supporting? And he told me he was the Senior Vice Commander of the Italian-American War Veterans in New Jersey. Never heard of him. I says, Italian-American War Veterans? Yeah. I said, I never heard of them. They in Pennsylvania? Yeah. Sure they are. I says, well, how come I never heard of them? He says, they used to have a post in Pittsburgh. I don't know what happened to it. It's died.
And when was this? When was this?
This was in the 80s when this guy's talking to me. See? So I says, you know, that interests me. If there's an Italian-American organization, I'd like to know about it. See? I said, have somebody contact me. So, sure enough, a guy came in from Youngstown to talk to me. He was the national commander of the Italian-American War Veterans. He was a judge in Mahoning County Court. Judge Lipari was his name, Lipari. And we talked, and he asked me if I would try to revive the organization here. It was a challenge. I took it. And the rest is history. See? So Judge Lipari was the guy that got me involved in the Italian-American War Veterans. Jack Lipari. We formed, I think in about 2 weeks I had over 50 members.
Yeah. 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You just taught guys you knew and
Yeah. World War II guys, you know.
World War II guys.
Then we got to the point where it was too big and we had too many members. Couldn't keep touch with all of them. So we split.
Okay. How big were you then?
Oh hell, we had 200-300 members. Mm-hmm. We formed the post in New Kensington, mm-hmm. McKees Rocks, Coriopolis.
And you said what, Penn Hills too?
Well, that's post 1.
Okay, that's post 1.
Yeah. Then I formed this post 32 in Pittsburgh. So we had post 1, we had 29, 30, 31, 32. We got 33 is up in Scranton.
So real quick, post 1 is Penn Hills. New Ken is what? Okay, this is 32, McKees Rocks.
Yeah, New Kensington's 31.
31, and Coriopolis.
This is 32. Coriopolis 29.
Mm-hmm.
33 is in Scranton.
Okay. 33.
Then there's 25, 26, 27, and 28. They're up in the Newcastle area.
And
there's
Newcastle, and they all fall under your jurisdiction?
well, the state commander is from Pittsburgh now. His name is David McMullen.
David
McMullen.
McMullen.
Yeah.
Is the state commander.
Yeah.
Of the Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All you have to have is part
of time. Okay.
Yeah.
He's the state commander. Okay. Wow. So each one is independent.
Yeah, the commander of Post 32, his name is Wilhelm.
Wilhelm. And you are
I'm the adjutant.
You're the adjutant. Hurry up. So, where was I at? We're talking about the Italian American veterans.
Yeah,
so you edit the torch.
Yeah.
And that goes to everybody, all national members.
I put out 6,000 of them every 3 months.
6,000, wow. And were you the one that started? Or
No.
You became the editor.
No.
How long have you been the editor for?
I've been editor since 92.
92.
Yeah, I believe that's when I became editor. They never had a torch like I put out. They used to send out, it was like a piece of newspaper, nothing in it. I got into a big hassle with him because that copy, did you keep it or did you put it in your bag or what?
I kept it.
The one I gave you.
Well, I think I gave it back to you. Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
We had it up here.
When I started this torch, see, in 1950, I edited a sports magazine in the Westinghouse Valley there, and we operated about a year, and we went out of business. And while I was in Africa, I edited the base newspaper. So there was always a little bit of newspaperman in me. Not enough to do it professionally, but as a hobby. So when they asked me to take over the torch, I said, fine, I'm glad to. But it's got to be run my way. I don't want any interference. See? So I started, and I put a little bit of our heritage in the magazine. Every magazine has a little bit about our ancestry. Like over here, here's the Italian-American women trailblazers. I do a lot of research, okay? I'll give you some of these so you can look at them. Here's...
Oh, by Rome.
You ever hear of this guy?
He was a telephone guy. No?
Yeah. Okay.
Sergeant Barcelona.
I tried to put a lot of pictures in. They like to see their picture in the paper. Right?
I guess everybody does.
All right, now.
Hey, that's me. It's Columbus?
How many can you identify?
Oh, wow. All famous Italian Americans.
Yep.
Frank Sinatra, Joe DiMaggio. Other one, sadly, no. Who prints this? You print it right here at your house, or you
No, I get it done at the Typecraft Printing Company at 23rd Street, South Side.
Okay, South Side.
Okay.
Yeah, nice job.
Yeah.
Hollywood versus Italians. Yeah.
There's a lot of history and a lot of daily stuff that they should know for now, about the organization. And this identifies those guys back here. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, to get it, I get that information from, there's a man by the name of Richard Capozzola. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or not. Richard Capozzola was the Commissioner of Police of Westchester County, New York. And he was a superintendent of schools of Westchester County. Mm-hmm. He's like me. He's what do they call us? We get involved in it. He wrote a couple of books, okay? And I get a lot of information from him. I get a lot of information from that NIAF.
Okay.
I get a lot of information from the Italic Studies of New York.
And
I'll give you one of his books.
Now, how is he involved with?
He's my friend.
He's your friend, and he's a member of this club too.
No, he's not a veteran.
No, he's not a veteran. Okay.
No.
Now, you have to be a member. You had to serve in a war, of course.
You had to be in the service. Yeah.
Oh, in the service?
Yeah.
So anybody could.
It used to, when they started out, you had to have served in the war. You had to be a World War I or World War II vet. Then they took in the Korean War. Okay. Then as more wars came around, little by little, they took it. Now, as long as you have a honorable discharge from the service, you could get in. Well, the World War I vets are all gone. World War II vets are just about all gone. I'm one of the youngest ones they have, World War II vet. Most of them are older than me.
So you said it started in 1932 in Connecticut by Italian soldiers who fought for the Americans?
They were Italian-American war veterans, not Italians. They were American veterans. And well, I've got a lot of old histories laying around here that you'd have a hell of a time reading it all.
Yeah, it's a lot to read. Would you say that now today, after 60 years, you consider yourself now Italian American, or as you stated earlier, you tell yourself you're American?
I'm an American of Italian heritage.
Italian heritage.
Right. Okay. I always tell these people, be proud of your heritage. Mm-hmm. But better, be worthy of it. Anybody could say, I'm Italian American. Be worthy of that name. Don't be ashamed of it. I'm an American. Hey, I shed blood for this country. But I'm not ashamed of my father and my grandparents.
Were you ever ashamed? Or
Never.
Never.
Never ashamed of my heritage. I grew up loving what we were. got into a lot of fights over it.
You think the image of Americans of Italian descent has changed since World War II? And did it make us more American? Did you feel more American, or made you feel closer to your?
Hollywood is doing its damnedest to keep the old image alive that all Italians belong to the mafia. Guys like Steven Spielberg should be made an offer that he can't refuse. They'll ship him back to Israel where he belongs. I know one thing. If they came out with a program about the Jews, the way he came out with a program about the Italians, they will shut down the country.
What program was this?
The Sopranos.
Oh, Spielberg's involved with that.
Yeah, sure. Now he's got another one. He's pushing one with about a shark that's supposed to be a mafia of the ocean, and all the fishes that are his. Really, it's a real stinking program that he's putting out, and it's a cartoon thing, like
Okay. Yeah.
what do they call an animated thing?
Yeah, animated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's all the mobster fishes all got Italian names like Guido and Giovanni and stuff like that. If they did that about the Jews, this country would be in an uproar. Do it about the blacks and see what would happen.
Yeah.
Jesse Jackson would have a fit. But the Italians, they tell me, a lot of these, anybody calls me a dago drives me crazy. I go crazy over it. Right? I will not take it. They tell me, why don't you get with it? Quit being so uptight. It's only a movie. It's only a cartoon. That ain't a cartoon. They're maligning us. And I can't see it.
Let me try to turn this real quick. Just remember something. Make it positive. Tell me about how you got that monument at the Veterans Hospital up in Highland Park. What was the process to get that in place? Real quick.
Well, the people in different parts of the country have monuments. Like in Connecticut, they got a beautiful monument for the Italian American veterans, and that thing they must have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to build it. It not only is a monument dedicated to the people, but it has the names of all the veterans, the Italian American veterans of that era. They're up there. In Minneapolis, which is not an Italian city, right? Yeah. You wouldn't think there's that many Italians in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
They got a monument dedicated to Italian American veterans up there that's about, I'd say about 20 feet high. It's an obelisk, is that what they call them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I have the pictures of them here.
Wow.
Okay. So I thought we should have one for the people in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
World War II, there were 26,000 Italian American veterans
And here in Pittsburgh.
in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
26,000. Wow. It's probably one of the biggest in the country, no?
Pennsylvania is Pennsylvania had one of the biggest Italian American population in the service during the war. But trying to raise the money was gigantic. I mean, I was ready to quit many times. I couldn't raise the money. Finally, the guy that I had contracted was that I talked to that was going to build the monument. I couldn't raise the money to do what he wanted to do for me. So out of desperation, I went down to the West Park Monument Works here in McKees Rocks, and I talked to the kid that runs the place. And he asked me how much money I had, and I told him. He said, "I'll see what I could do for you." So he contacted the company he buys his granite from, and it's about marble. And they had this piece of stone they had cut for another project, and it fell through. So they told him he could have that for a small amount of money. Right? Now, you see the size of that. It's over 6 feet tall. It's almost 7 feet. From here to here, it's almost 7 feet tall. 5 feet across. He gave it to me for the money I had. He did. He says, "I'll donate the rest."
That was really nice.
So he did. The labor was free. He didn't charge me for the labor. He didn't charge me for the engraving or anything. And the deal we made was if they shut down Highland Drive, he's going to pick it up and haul it over to Aspinwall. Free. Young fellow down there at West Park. It's the West Park Monuments in McKees Rocks.
Oh, so this is in Aspinwall? Or?
It's in Highland Drive. He said if they shut down Highland Drive, he'll move it, put it in Aspinwall.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. Okay. It's a nice monument. Real quick, I'll just read it. And it says, they came as immigrants, they served as citizens, they died as Americans. In honor of all of our fallen heroes, lost but not forgotten, thank you for giving us the freedom of realizing our dreams. And this was just installed last October, right?
Yeah.
In 2003.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful tribute. That'll be around for many years. So I think any final thoughts about?
No, I think like I say, I think you ought to talk to Walter Vicinelli, because he's a real hero from the war. Okay. And Dominic. Yeah. Then there's a couple other guys that are had a lot of experiences they could tell you about. Like Frank Cecilia, he was a ranger during World War II, and he's got some stories that he could tell you.
Well, anything else? I guess we just have to continue to fight, and I guess our image is...
Only thing I'm saying is be proud of your heritage.
Right. Be proud of your heritage.
Be worthy of it.
Absolutely right.
What the Italians have done for this country is immeasurable. We go back a long way. And it's too bad. We have Black History Month. We have Chinese History Month. We have the big deal over here is St. Patrick's Day Parade, where everybody gets drunk, and yet the Italian American history, which is I don't know what the word I wanted to say. It's incomprehensible, because there's so much of it that people don't know about. And they don't teach it. They don't tell you about it. They keep it a secret. Why?
Unfortunately. Well, to say, well, thank you for keeping our heritage alive through this magazine.
I'm going to give you a couple books that I want you to read.
Okay.
My buddy's book, because it's 5 centuries of Italian-American history. It should be a textbook in the schools.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you for the interview, and any quick final thoughts?
That's it.